I think we're live. I think we're live. Can someone give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? I think you can see me, but I don't know if you can hear me. So someone give me a thumbs up if you can hear me.
I can't see you currently. Not sure about Raz.
No, I don't think anyone can see me or hear me.
No. What does it say on your screen?
All I've got is me talking to the camera live, and a set of end stream on the right with an arrow, a forward up, a microphone. You can see me. Yeah, people can see me, but they can't hear me.
We can hear you now too.
Right.
You're able to hang up on us now.
Okay, great. Right, I am reliably informed that everyone can see and hear me. I believe this to be the case. In which case, I can only say, hello world. And don't even talk to me about bloody Mercury retrograde. Now, no blaspheming, no nastiness, okay? That's the rules. So, it is 11 minutes past 7 UK time on the 24th of August 2024. And I'm doing this live stream on the Great Reset. Now, this is only the second live stream I've ever done in my life. I have no idea what I'm doing. I have some wonderful technicians in the background in different parts of the world who are helping me. And I just hope it works. So bear with me if it doesn't. We'll work with it. I'm not going to be able to show you the graphics I wanted to show you, but what I have got is loads and loads of information. And once I get into this, I know I'll start flowing. So bear with me. Give me a couple of minutes as we get into this. So let's go. To quote Terence McKenna, human history represents such a radical break to the systems of biological organization that preceded it, that it must be the response to some type of dwell point or attractor that lies ahead in the temporal dimensions. History has failed. We're about to step into a new way of life, the like of which we've dreamt about for tens of thousands of years. Our ancestors around their campfires 8 to 10,000 years ago, through all the different levels of civilization, have dreamt of this time we're in now. So first of all, I want to do some astrology, and then I'm going to try and make sense of it and turn it into coherent English. So let's start in the late 1700s with the discovery of Uranus. Up until the late 1700s, we'd only known about all the planets out to Saturn. Saturn was seen as the bogeyman. We knew by then that Jupiter and Saturn had moons and that Saturn had rings around it. And because Saturn was the furthest planet we could see with our naked eye, it was seen as the planet of limitation and restriction. And the rings around it gave this idea of being held in and constrained. Then we discovered Uranus, and Uranus was synchronistically discovered within a couple of years of both the American and the French Revolution. Uranus has always been associated with revolution. Uranus is about change. Now, without change, you get entropy, which leads to decay, and stagnation, and extinction. Change can be disruptive, chaotic, dramatic, sudden, violent, and unpredictable. It can equally be stimulating, innovative, original, exciting, and adventurous. It can lead to chaos and disorder, or it can bring independence, freedom, and liberty. When Uranus was discovered, it was the French Revolution, the American Revolution, and the emergence of people fighting for individual human rights. Fast forward, 1840, 1841, Neptune's discovery. At the same time as Neptune was discovered, Neptunian archetypes were coming into the public consciousness. We were seeing the onset of mesmerism and hypnotism. It was the first development of camera film. It was the first organized brewing in the Western world. It was the first drug war with the opium wars with China. It was the advent of spirituality, and with people like Zadkiel, Raphael, Gabriel in Britain. And it was the start of time where people began to dream of what might be for the future. The Industrial Revolution was taking place. Fast forward. 1930, Pluto is discovered. Pluto is discovered in 1930. At the same time, the underworld revolution in America, the mafia, is happening in 1929. In the late 1700s, uranium is discovered. In the 1840s, neptunium is discovered. In 1933, I think, then Seaborg discovered a new element which he called plutonium. We're seeing Rutherford cracking the atom. We're seeing the start of people like Fermi, Rutherford, Heisenberg, and the development of the first ideas around quantum theory, quantum mechanics. We're also seeing Carl Jung espousing modern ideas of psychology into the world for the very first time. So as Pluto was discovered, all of these ideas around atomic power, psychology, and dealing with the unconscious and subconscious are really beginning to emerge into the consciousness. We then head into a really crazy period of time. Now, the idea is from here on, we start to accelerate in intensity of astrological aspects. And there's going to be a few specific timings between 1930 to the present that I want to focus on. Firstly, I'm looking at the period of 1931 to 1934. Uranus was square Pluto. Uranus was in Aries, square Pluto in Cancer. Aries being the rights of the individual, Cancer being the need for family and security, whether it's a national family or a personal family. With Uranus square Pluto, there's massive change going on in the world. And at the same time as this, Saturn is opposite Pluto and square Uranus, particularly in 1931, which sees the birth of the brown shirts and the black shirts and the rise of fascism. Fast forward, post-war, we come to the generation born of the Uranus-Neptune square, 1954 to 1956, when Saturn is squaring Pluto at the same time. And it could be said that the generation born at this time, of which I'm one, we didn't so much go down the doorways into different perceptive fields, but we opened them for future generations. Fast forward to the mid-1960s, from April 1965 to January 1967, we have Uranus conjunct Pluto in Virgo. Now, this went on for 4 or 5 years, but over that April 65 to January 67, there's a peak period when not only is Uranus conjunct Pluto, but Saturn in the sky is opposite Uranus conjunct Pluto. And I think that generation born 65, 66, they kind of grabbed the boundaries and started dragging the unconscious and the subconscious into the world. They changed the boundaries of the world we were living in. And this was the hippie generation. And there is a particular crunch period. There's a sub-generation in this period that I've noticed their charts are really relevant at this time. And that's the generation born in June and July 1965, when Jupiter in the sky was in the middle of Gemini, squaring Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto. And that's a particularly interesting sub-generation. Fast forward again, 1982 to 1983, November 82 to November 83. Saturn and Pluto conjuncting each other at 28, 29 degrees of Libra, and then both of them moving into Scorpio within a month of each other. And particularly in Britain, this was a year of the 2-year-long miners' strike, where people in the dark, in the depths of the earth, digging out coal, went on strike for better living conditions. And Margaret Thatcher basically trashed them. Saturn conjunct Pluto in Scorpio. It's a great symbology. And we thought that Saturn and Pluto together moving into Scorpio bring nuclear war, and it brought an end to the nuclear war. It brought a lot of the nuclear agreements at that time. We also thought it would bring a sexual revolution, and it brought us HIV. Fast forward again. The Uranus-Neptune conjunction in Capricorn is brewing when Saturn's in Capricorn also. And Saturn conjunct Uranus conjunct Neptune over February 88 to November 89. This was the start. This was when the first codes were being written of the internet. This was the beginning of the breakdown of the old structures of the ideas of big national states. I know it's taken 30 years to get to the beyond that, but we can trace a lot of the changes in the world today back to 1988 and 1989 and Saturn conjunct Uranus conjunct Neptune. This was followed in 93, still with Saturn squaring Pluto, still with the Uranus-Neptune conjunction petering out as they both move on. In 2001, Saturn opposite Pluto on the American ascendant, and of course, that was represented by 9/11. And then we get the Uranus-Neptune square, Uranus-Pluto square of June 2012 to March 2015. Now, we had a Uranus-Pluto square in 1931 to 1934, and we had another one in 2012 to 2015. But in 1931 to 34, it was Uranus in Aries square Pluto in Cancer. Individual human rights versus the need of the family. In 2012 to 2015, it was Uranus in Aries square Pluto in Capricorn. So individual rights, human rights versus the need of the greater collective, the corporate, the banks, the politicians, the governments, because that's what Capricorn stands for. It stands for the way we govern ourselves or that we are governed. Over the last 50 to 60 years, the acceleration of planetary aspects in the sky has escalated. And it's suggesting that the evolutionary urge is increasing. Now, I'm an accelerationist and an evolutionist. I know one or two people have taken umbrage with me. A few people don't believe me when I say this, but the facts speak for themselves. When I was born in 1955, there were 2.1 to 2.2 billion people on this planet. There are now 8 billion. In my lifetime, the population of this planet has quadrupled. Some of you don't believe it. Some of you believe that's a conspiracy, but conspiracies, really, I'm too old for all that. Population has quadrupled in the time that I've been alive. When I was a child, Western spirituality meant going to Sunday school. Now we have all types of pick and mix spirituality of every possible type, from cults to tarot to astrology to new age healing. It's out there. When I was young, new technology was this brown wooden box with a black and white flickering screen that we could watch big events on, along with 50 other people crammed into a living room. Now, streaming all over the world. Technology, spirituality, and population are all rapidly accelerating, and it is not in a straight line graph. It is in an escalatory graph curve. When that happens, only one of two things can happen. When a graph reaches prime vertical, only one or two things can happen. either the graph will reach that point of prime vertical and it will implode, and suddenly everything will collapse and the graph will start building over a very long period of time going up the other way. I suggest this is analogous to the idea of left brain versus right. And I'd suggest, and I have no way of proving this, and it's just a suggestion on my part, but there would have been a time about 12,500 years ago, 10,500 years ago, I'm sorry, which is half of a precessional cycle, which is around the time that the ice sheets finally melted and the Great Flood happened. And the flood is represented in the legends of every culture in the world. And it all seems to have happened about 8,500 BC, some to 9,000 BC, possibly as late as 10,500 BC. This was a time of really big climate change, the ice sheets melting. This is a cycle. We all know it's a cycle. It's easy to say that global warming and the climate chaos that's coming is down to humans. Maybe. That's a political statement. I don't want to get into that. But the fact is the climate is changing, and it does seem to be on this very long scale cycle. And I suggest that the Great Flood of all those 10,000 years ago created so much cataclysm and disaster that it trashed society as existed at that time. And we went from being right brain into being left brain. I'm not going to suggest we're going to go back to being right brain. I suggest we're heading into a time of global and lobal sharing. I find it, as an aside, I find it fascinating that only 50,000 years ago, which is a drop in the ocean in terms of planetary time, it was only 50,000 years ago that Homo sapiens developed from Homo neanderthalis, or Cro-Magnon being between the two. And it's only 50,000 years ago that we got the bilobal brains with that little bridge linking the two, the corpus callosum. As I said, to quote McKenna, human history doesn't happen that fast. It should take millions of years for that to evolve. It seems to me that if you follow that graph to the top, we're approaching the point of either breakthrough or breakdown. Now, breakdown is easy to talk about. Breakthrough, well, we'll come to that in a bit. But let's come back to the astrology, because this is where it starts getting really interesting. Over the next few years, well, Pluto is already moving into Aquarius, okay? Started moving into Aquarius last year. It's moving back into Capricorn in a couple of days' time, retrograde, and then it's going to move back into Aquarius again, finally and permanently at the end of this year. Next year, we're going to see the first forays, the first movement of Neptune into Aries, and Uranus into Gemini, and Saturn into Aries. And then they will all go retrograde back into the signs they're in at the moment. Pluto with its 248-year cycle, Neptune with a 163-year cycle, Uranus with its 84-year cycle, and Saturn with its 29.4-year cycle. For all these four planets to be changing signs within a year of each other, all of them moving from feminine signs into masculine signs, you have to multiply 4 by 360 times the number of their orbital patterns to get the statistics on this happening. It's way out of coincidental. So what this tells me is that we're heading into the most concentrated and compressed change of human history. So using my astrological software, I've tried looking back to see when was the last time something like this happened. My software stopped around about 5,000 years ago. It didn't. It just didn't happen. It's never happened before. And if it has happened before, something of this strength, then it happened at a time when Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto were unknown to us. We couldn't see them. We didn't have telescopes. Telescopes have only been around. Okay, the Moorish Arabs developed the first far-sighted lenses. They were milling lenses around about 1300. But it's not really until the 1600s that we start seeing telescopes more commonly. And Galileo was the first one to use telescopes to look into space because he saw the moons of Jupiter. And of course, he got into serious trouble with the church for that, because that was the final proof. That confirmed what Copernicus said, that the Earth was not the center of the universe. And of course, he got put under house arrest for the rest of his life for saying that. To see a change like this happening, it's not just a once in a lifetime event. It's not even a once in a millennium event. It's once in a species event. So actually, let's just look at what's coming up. Now, on the one hand, most of the aspects that are coming up over the coming 2 or 3 years are really nice ones. But I've been studying astrology 45 years now. I've learned to treat nice aspects with a degree of caution. Sometimes I prefer the hard aspects because then at least you know what you're dealing with. So even though the nice aspects suggest that a lot of nice things are going to happen, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be as nice as I would like it to be. But the good thing is that this period of compression is brief. We've already started this with Pluto moving into Aquarius. And as I said, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune will all change sign next year and then retrograde back. Also next year, we have the first signs of Uranus sextiling Neptune. And Saturn will sextile Uranus in 2025, somewhere around 29 degrees of Pisces to 29 degrees of Taurus at the very end of their signs. But this is a prelude. Let's just break down these major aspects. Neptune sextile Pluto has been around since the late 1940s. And most people alive now have Neptune sextile Pluto in their chart. So you cannot say, oh, I've got Neptune sextile Pluto in my chart, therefore I'm like this. But what you can say at a species level is that using the words, the window of opportunity for a sextile, and with Pluto in a good mood, talking about transformation, regeneration, and rebirth, and Neptune in a good mood, talking about compassion, empathy, spirituality, it says that the potential for the transformation of the imagination, changing a lot of old ideas and dreams and visions into blueprint, schedule, and plan, has validity. Another way of looking at the same thing is that Neptune is going to bring a much more potentially empathic, compassionate, and spiritual vibe into the way we want our world to change for the better. And that means we're all going to be looking after each other much more. The idea of becoming isolationist appeals to a lot of people at the moment, but I suggest that these are the people who are living in fear or who are wanting to hang on to what they've got, and that is based, fear and greed are the evil twin sisters in this one. In the next year or two, Uranus will also be sextiling. Neptune will also be sextiling Uranus. Uranus brings change. And Uranus is going to be moving into Gemini. So what this tells me is that there's going to be windows of opportunity for a way to revolutionize our ideas about art, music, empathy, compassion, spirituality, intuition, imagination, creativity, and our relationship with spirit and with the divine, however we choose to see our relationship with the divine as being. Call it what you like. Some people call it God, Buddha, Allah. Others people call it the universe. I call it the upstairs department. Call it what you like. And then Uranus is going to be trining Pluto. I can't wait for this one. Pluto is going to be in early Aquarius, a sign of global community, a sign of our long-term goals and ambitions. And I think that Pluto in Aquarius is going to be breaking down a lot of the borders that exist between people, not just national borders or land borders, but borders based on race, color, age, gender, sexual orientation, religion, particularly. Uranus in Gemini is going to bring a really welcome mental revolution in our attitude towards the way we use both soft and hard technology. And when you've got the two of them trying to each other, as they will be for a couple of years in the next few years, between now and 2027, they're already trying now, then this is going to be a harmonious flow of new technology, bringing a kind of global transformation, whilst at the same time revolutionizing and transforming our attitudes towards technology. I know a lot of people have been criticizing me because I've started working with AI and ChatGPT in my astrology work, but the genie's out of the bottle. We can't ignore it. It's there. And if we don't use it, it's going to get viral and it's going to get out of control. But if we do use it and train it to work with us, then it can be a magnificent thing for the future. Fear of the new, fear of the unknown or the unknowable has been a regular theme of human development. We were scared of radio and television. We were scared of electricity, the Y2K bug. We were scared of apps and mobile phones. Now we're scared of AI. None of these things have killed us quite yet. But then there's the bogeyman. Hello, Saturn. Saturn is going to move into Aries with Neptune. Now, on the one hand, Saturn's going to spend 9 to 10 months sextiling Uranus. Lovely. Saturn's going to bring a degree of structure into the more chaotic side of Uranus. So it's going to limit the sort of radicality of the Uranian novelty, inventions, and acceleration of the next few years. It's going to limit it, but not hold it back. Whilst at the same time, Uranus is going to revolutionize Saturn's limitations and change its boundaries from concrete and steel into rubber and elastic. We're going to learn how to bend our respective rules instead of breaking them. Saturn is also going to be sextiling Pluto over the next 2 years. And this is going to bring structure into the way we transform, regenerate, and rebirth our ideas towards community. The global community is emerging, and the dinosaurs who still wish to create isolated states are on a losing streak. I know this scares a lot of people, and a lot of people are going, no, I've got to have my borders. I don't want all those people coming over here and taking my jobs and bringing their religion. And kind of, I get it. I really get it. I'm happy about anyone coming to my country, but leave your religion behind. And when I see just today, the Taliban in Afghanistan have said that women are no longer allowed to speak in public and they're not allowed to sing. Viewed over a long term, viewed in the big picture, this is accelerating the change that's inevitable. The kickback against this is going to be strong and imminent. Viewed from a dispassionate nature, I understand why it's happening, because it's going to accelerate the development of a divine feminine, and not a moment too soon. Viewed passionately, I'm completely perplexed. I just really don't get it. But that's what religion does. Religare, to bind down, to hold down from the Latin. Same root as the word ligament, to tie muscle to bone. Consider religion to be the single most divisive force in human history, or at least over the last couple of years. Last couple of millennia. And I'm not going to change my mind on that one. It's a personal opinion. Saturn is going to conjunct Neptune. Now, Saturn conjuncts Neptune every 42 years, every 44 years. So what's the big deal? It's a regular cycle. And Saturn conjunct Neptune is common in the global horoscopes of things that are affected by the Communist Party and the communist situation. The Marx Engels Manifesto, the Bolshevik Revolution, the rise of the Berlin Wall, the fall of the Berlin Wall. All of these happened on a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, a Saturn-Neptune conjunction, or a Saturn-Neptune opposition. I mean, the ideas of the old politics of capitalism and communism are becoming so redundant now, but nothing like that's going to happen again. But there is going to be a push towards the greater community. But the problem is, Saturn is going to conjunct Neptune at 0 degrees of Aries at the very, very start of the zodiac. This to me is a massive reset point. 0 degrees of Aries. Everything starts there. And Saturn conjunct Neptune, viewed in a difficult way, it's going to impose so much restriction and limitation and imposed boundaries and control on any of the imaginal, the ideas, the dreams, the visions, and the spiritual way of dealing with the world. It's going to be the last death gasp of the old power blocks trying to limit people's imagination and stop them thinking for themselves in a desperate attempt to retain the power they've had for 2,000 years. Viewed at a neutral perspective, Neptune is going to soften some of Saturn's boundaries and become more flexible in the way that it adapts and changes while still keeping an element of structure and formation about it. Viewed in a positive way, Saturn conjunct Neptune is going to really be a massive kickstarter to the way we see the way we live on this planet. Now, I do see Saturn conjunct Neptune as the bogeyman in all of these combinations. And it's probably going to lead to an escalation in the short to minor medium term of environmental issues. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see further environmental challenges accelerate rapidly over the next couple of years. And that is going to then force the larger groups on this planet to look at the nature of greed. Greed and power and disempowerment are they've been around since the early days. They've been around for thousands and thousands of years. It's always been my God is bigger than your God. But now 75 to 80% of the people on this planet are under 30. And just in this last 5 or 6 years, a lot of you, thank you the internet, thank you the apps and TikTok and Facebook and all of them, a lot of the youth are now waking up to astrology and other forms of self-help, and they're beginning to disregard the imposed structures that they've been brought up in. Now, in some cases, this has gone really way off kilter, and I did a session the other day publicly on some of the syndromes that we get, where a lot of kids are being born with challenges that simply weren't happening 40 years ago. But then 40 years ago, only 1 or 2% of people were getting cancer. There was no obesity, no lifestyle diseases. I could rant at this point about processed food, but what's the point? If you're watching me, you're already on this. You're already intelligent enough to know how to manage your own life. That's the theory anyway. But at the same time, the majority of the youth are looking at the way we've managed the planet. The older people have managed the planet in the last 50 or 60 years. And they're going, this isn't working. And because they're still under 30, the majority of them, they're not quite at the point where they're thinking, okay, we can do better. But they will be within 10 years. I am suggesting that there's a peak moment in the next few years. And I think we'll know that pink moment. One of my long-term friends is a woman called Serena Roney Dougal. She was the first person in the world to get a PhD in parapsychology. And she changed her thesis into a book. It was called Where Science and Magic Meet. Highly recommended. And she suggests that whenever you get and she suggests from her studies and from the scientists she spoke to, that in any type of evolution, whether it's microbial, atomic, human, when the amount of a species, even if it's at the subatomic level, once the number of them living in a confined space gets to a certain number, a mutation has to occur. Often single-celled organisms, once they reach a certain number, will become multi-celled, because then they consume less food and they require less space to live. I'm not suggesting that's going to happen to us, obviously. But there seems to be a certain number, a coadjuvant number, a collective number where something happens. And in all different types of experiences, that number seems to be 10 to the power of 10 or 10 billion. Humanity is now at 10 to the power of 9.8, 8 billion. We're within range. And I suggest that by the time we reach 10 billion, which at current rate is going to be within a decade, there's going to be some type of natural accelerated evolution at the temporal level. Our brains are going to suddenly expand. I don't mean expand in size. It's my understanding that we only use a quarter of our brain power consciously while we're awake, and something like 28 to 30% whilst we're asleep. The rest of it appears to be not so much dormant, but inaccessible. And I suggest that we're going to open some of the doorways into those previously unexplored areas of our brain, and that these planetary signals that are coming over the next few years are going to encourage us to expand our consciousness. Now, that's easy to say, and it's part of the fluffy language of the last few years. So what does it actually mean, expanding consciousness? It means becoming more sensitive, seeing the ruination of the earth, seeing the way we treat children, women, animals. I suggest that within 5 to 10 years, we're all going to notice a massive change in our ability to be receptive, to feel more empathic, intuitive, compassionate, sensual, receptive, kind. And we're not going to stand for people, predominantly men, imposing order on anyone else just for the sake of their own power base or ego. And that we're going to move into a kind of extended and expanded mental space where we're going to become aware of things that we've not previously been aware of. Now, I'm just going to go completely off planet for a moment, all right? Those of you who know me well, you know I do this every so often. I just go on a rant. Right. I have been personally in many, many, many hundreds of crop circle formations. I have pictures of 10,000 of them. I have studied them extensively since 1989. The crop circle phenomena will be my PhD if I ever get a spare 7 years to do it, that chance. I know things about the crop circles that very few people know. And it's not secret knowledge, it's public, but most people just choose not to believe it. Crop circles is just one thing. What I do know is that the crop circles don't come from ET. They don't come from aliens. I've seen them under an electron microscope and seen the way that the genetic structure of the wheat has been changed. And that's comparing one shoot of wheat to another shoot of wheat, one from a crop circle and one from 2 foot outside the crop circle. I've heard the shrilling noises. I've sensed the electrics that go on in these crop circles. I've seen the effects they have on other people. I know they're not ET because I've been in fields when they've happened. I've been overlooking fields when they've happened and nothing's come down. I don't believe they're made by humans. I know they're not made by humans. Humans can't change the atomic structure. So if they're not made by humans, they're not made by ETs, and they're not made by animals, and they're not made by Mother Earth, because Mother Earth speaks to us in terms of hurricanes and volcanoes and earthquakes. What does that leave? It means we have to think outside the box. These days, more and more young people are being encouraged to open their minds, to think for themselves rather than to believe what they're being told to believe. And I suggest that in a few years' time, we're going to realize that we're not alone. When I say we're not alone, everyone thinks, oh, we're going to expand into outer space and meet our galactic space brothers and sisters. Rubbish. No, we're not. We're just going to expand our minds. And by doing that, we're going to realize that we live in a more multidimensional reality where just there, you've got the land of the fair folk, the pixie, the goblin. Just there, just outside of our perception, is where the crop circle makers live. Just there at the very back is the angelic realm. All of these beings live on planet Earth. They're indigenous to this planet. They live outside of our range of perception in a dimension, and the veils are thinning. We're becoming more and more aware of the multidimensionality of this planet. One planet, many species. Another way of looking at the same thing is to say, one planet, 8 billion different worlds. We all see things differently. I'm not trying to push my opinions on anyone. I'm trying to get people to think for themselves and suggesting ideas. And I've got 45 years of astrological study to come back to, and this brings me back to where I started. In 2025, the final jockeying for position happens. Saturn and Neptune will both move into Aries for the final time in early 2026. They will conjunct each other on the 20th of February 2026. In July 2026, Uranus will sextile Neptune, Neptune will sextile Pluto, Uranus will trine Pluto. And this will happen again in July 2027. The period of July 2026 to June 2027 is a 12-month period which shows the biggest period of concentrated astrological patterning that there's ever been. And before I started this tonight, I looked out there in the ephemeris and I thought, okay, so when's the next big one after this? And I run my software and I thought, okay, let's just run it forward 50, 60 years, see what happens. And the next big change is that Uranus will square Neptune over 2039, 2040. That's 15 years away. And then Uranus will oppose Pluto in about 25, 30 years' time. But this is tame compared to what's coming up now. We are about to move into the biggest period of concentrated and compressed change we've ever experienced. And when I say we've ever experienced, I don't just mean in our lives, I mean in our species history. Training is at an end. The apprenticeship of humanity is now over. We're entering the final examination to determine our worthiness to evolve and to grow into becoming what we truly have the potential to be. Oh, I'm getting shivers now. We can do this. It has to be collective and it has to be done willingly and with love in our hearts. Whilst at the same time, I'm not going to sit around a campfire and sing happy, clappy songs. I'm going to do it from a down-to-earth, grounded perspective with proper values and try and keep my feet as firmly rooted on the ground as I can. My studies of astrology have taught me that the ideas of karma, reincarnation, are just another form of guilt trip, superimposed upon us by a ruling elite who want to threaten us with ideas of heaven or hell, or Sheol, or Tartarus, whatever. Actually, no. We volunteered to come here. We're mission specialists. You chose to come. You chose to be here, and this is your mission now. Or at least that's the way I'm seeing it. And if I'm wrong, hey, I'm having a great time. I might be kidding myself. I might be deluded, but I'm having a great time doing it. I'm going to start drawing this to an end. But I wanted to say something else. I've become aware in this last 5 to 10 years of massive changes going on inside my own brain. I have had various experience with taking things I shouldn't have done when I was younger. Nothing's really touched me that much. I still take psilocybin once a year. It's like a once every year examination. We used to do it a lot more. But I know that I'm changing inside. I'm seeing more things. I'm sensing more things, picking up clearer signals, getting clear insight, trusting myself more and more. Sometimes, if I want to know the answer, I just have to focus, hold the intent, open my mouth, and the words come out. And I have no idea what I'm going to say sometimes. And it'd be easy to say, oh, he's out of control, he's losing it. No, this is the next step. We're changing fast now. And the planetary phenomena in our skies suggest to us that within 3 years from now, this change is going to be completed. And from then on, the way we are in 3 years from now is going to determine the next 50 plus years. So we either have the choice of living in some type of dystopian, cyborgian reality where the ruling elite are separate from everyone else and we're just cannon fodder, or we're going to join into some type of global community linked by intuition, imagination, creativity, and an open heart, and we're going to become all that we truly could be. It's time for our species to evolve and to take the next evolutionary leap, and it's a wonderful time to be alive. What a great time to be alive. I'm going to quit now while I'm ahead because I'm beginning to rant and ramble. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope this has been interesting. I'm going to do something like this a lot more often now. And next time I'll try and get the technology to work even better so I can show lots of nice pictures and graphics and astrological charts. Thank you for attending. Sorry I haven't been able to do any of the questions, but there's just been floods of them. Thank you. Catch you next time. Blessings.